Gary King, after 21 years as the Chief Executive Officer of the Ohio Agribusiness Association, will be officially retiring from the organization at the end of October. Born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, King attended Michigan State University and shortly thereafter began his career in agribusiness with Michigan Miller's Insurance Company. Not having grown up in a farm environment, this role was a challenging one for King, but one that he truly enjoyed.
My job was to write the insurance specifically for agricultural business and particularly grain and elevators, and liked the job pretty well. More and more got involved with agriculture. And then one day OSHA, Ohio Safety and Health Act, came along, and they wanted dust-proof boxes everywhere. They wanted everything just the way they wanted it. And a guy by the name of George Greenleaf, this would have been in the early 60s, I think, George, and his counterpart in Michigan, Stan Sherman. And George said, Gary, you're pretty well up on the electrical requirements and why we shouldn't have to do all these things at the cost that they're going to require, et cetera, et cetera. Stan Sherman and I are going to Washington, D.C. They know us too well, and they're not going to listen to what we have, but I think they will take the word of a young insurance guy. And we'd like to have a House testimony, and we'd like to have you represent us. I turned whiter than a sheet, I'm sure. I was probably early 30s at the most, and I said, well, gosh, that's a real opportunity. I really would like to do that. And so they whipped me into the car, and there's George Greenleaf, Stan Sherman, and Gary King in the car on their way to Washington, D.C. We got through the testimony pretty well, and on the way back I said, I could do this. I kind of like this.
It wasn't long after that Stan Sherman retired, and Stan must have remembered that he liked what he saw that day on the Hill from King, because Gary got a call asking if he'd be the executive of the Michigan Agribusiness Association.
And I said, well, gee, I can't run it. I'm not even on the board. I participate a lot in it, but I'm not even on the board. And they said, we don't mean a board member. We mean as the executive. I was pretty nervous about it, but I said, well, let's give it a try. And then for about 4 or 5 years, I was the executive for the Michigan Agribusiness Association.
That's when King got to see more of John Foltz, who at the time took over for George Greenleaf as the executive of the Ohio Agribusiness Association.
It was about, I believe, in the real early 90s, I think, John, that you had decided to take a position in Washington, D.C., almost like your second home, I think, down there at times. And I was approached by the board here in Ohio to come down and interview for the position. And I was pretty well established in Michigan. I loved my Michigan State Spartans, and I said, well, Ohio's nice, and John has painted a pretty picture down there, but I don't think so.
After turning down the job 3 more times, King finally found himself interviewing for the CEO position of the Ohio Agribusiness Association.
On my way home, I had basically told the interview committee that I really thought I was going to stay in Michigan, but the more I thought about it as I drove home, the more I thought about maybe the opportunity is there. Maybe I'm there for a reason. And I stopped on the way home, and at that time we didn't have the cell phones, so we used a phone in a convenience store, called back down. Somebody had to run and get one of the guys in the committees, and I said, I left you with a negative impression about my decision to come to Ohio. I said, I really have changed my mind. And I said, I just called my wife, and she's willing, and if the position is open and I'm the person of your choice, I'd like to be that person.
During the interview process, King was told of all the great things happening with the association at that time. But it wasn't until King sat in the seat that he realized there were some major challenges ahead.
The Ohio Agribusiness Association, like many associations in the country, had their own self-insurance, health insurance programs. And I think probably every state in the country had their own version of a self-insurance program. But it was about that time that expenses were going up, premiums were going up, and the boards of directors of the various states were really wearing 2 hats. Number one, they were the people who asked for the premiums, but number 2, they were the people who paid the premium as well. And Ohio, as well as several other states, were kind of in a death spiral at the time, where the good people were leaving for less premiums, and I say the good people from a complaint standpoint or a claim standpoint, and those that didn't have such good records were in a position where they had to stay. And so you had more and more people that were responsible for more and more claims, less and less money to handle it, and it wasn't long you were in what is called a death spiral or soon to be out of business.
That challenge was one that Gary conquered, and he and his team saved the Ohio Agribusiness Association from disappearing from the agricultural landscape.
We then got out of the self-insurance business. We reduced the staff by about 8 or 9. Many of those staff people John had hired to run the insurance business, and of course if we're not going to be in the insurance business, we didn't need them.
More changes were on the horizon for OABA, including the location of the offices. First to North High Street in Worthington, and then to their present location on Reed Road in Columbus. Then came more organizational rearrangements.
A few of those changes, I was a real believer in using the entire board for everything that we did. I didn't believe in using a lot of the executive committee decisions if we didn't have to get them together on the side. And that's proven to be very, I think, very helpful in that the whole board is always involved in everything that we do. It's not a 2 or 3 person making the decisions. We believe in very strong committees. We believe in giving those committees not only the power to be creative, but the authority and the ability to move ahead with their decisions. In my case, I shifted a little more towards the regulation rather than the legislation. We got to know ODA very well. We're very proud of our relationship with them. And all in all, it's been a great 21 years, and I certainly wish Chris all the best as he takes a hold of the reins. He's hit the ground running, and I have no fear about the leadership and the future of the Ohio Agribusiness Association.
Congratulations and good luck to Gary King, and thank you for your service to the Ohio Agribusiness Association.